The night my in-laws were kidnapped, my husband wanted to go camping with his beloved white moonlight. I didn't try to stop him. This time, I called the police immediately. In my previous life, I had stopped him from leaving, so he went to rescue his parents and missed the chance to be with his precious white moonlight. That night, she was mauled to death by wild wolves in the mountains, a horrific, tragic end. He never said a word about it, not even after everything that happened. Until I was pregnant and near labor, he dragged me into a deep forest and threw me there like trash. "You, Vivian, if it weren't for you, she would still be alive," he said. "What right do you have to live in comfort when she died in agony? I want you to suffer every bit of pain she went through with my own eyes." I was torn apart by wild beasts, me and my unborn child, gone in one brutal moment. And then I woke up. Back to the exact day my in-laws were kidnapped. This time, my husband didn't join the rescue mission. He finally got to save his white moonlight, just as he wished. But his hair turned completely gray overnight. I screamed in fear and jolted awake. My body was drenched in sweat, my clothes clung to my skin, and I could still feel the searing pain of flesh being ripped apart. My hands instinctively reached down to touch my flat stomach, listening for my heartbeat. Tears poured like rain. I groped around for my phone and checked the time. I had been reborn. Reborn to the exact day my in-laws were kidnapped. Any minute now, the kidnappers would call. They'd demand $30,000 in ransom within 30 minutes, or the hostages would die. My husband and I were childhood sweethearts. Our families had promised each other we'd be married since we were kids. Whether it was for family alliance or because of my love, I had always known I would become his wife. I knew he had an ex he never got over, someone his family never approved of. Before our wedding, I asked him, "Are you marrying me because you love me? Are you doing this willingly?" He answered yes. So, I walked down the aisle with peace in my heart. But after the wedding, he became distant and cold, still secretly entangled with his ex. I pretended not to notice, kept silent. I loved him, I didn't want to lose him or our marriage. But loving him cost me everything. It cost me my life, and the life of my baby who grew inside me for 10 months. Now that I have this second chance, I won't make the same mistake. I watched Calvin Turner come running down the stairs. I slowly rose from the sofa. Our eyes met. "I'm not coming home tonight," he said quietly. I said nothing. Instead, I turned toward the phone on the coffee table. The kidnapper's call was coming. I picked up, put the phone on speaker. A cold voice barked out. "We have Charles Turner and Amanda York. $30,000 ransom. You've got 30 minutes to bring it to Liberty Square. Call the cops, and they die." As the voice echoed through the room, Calvin barely raised an eyebrow. He gave a dismissive scoff and let out a mocking laugh. "I'm all ears, Vivian. You think this little performance of yours is fun? Getting everyone to act along with you like it's some kind of show, how amusing." Looking at Calvin Turner's face, I couldn't help but recall the moment I was dragged into hell while he stood there, watching coldly, indifferent. More than 10 years of love had already turned to dust. "Calvin," I said calmly, "you've heard the call. Whatever you want to do now is up to you. I won't interfere. If you want to think this is just some act I'm putting on with your parents, so be it. But I'll say it again, I'm not acting with them." Maybe it was the calmness in my voice, but for a moment, Calvin hesitated. Still, in the end, he turned and walked out with long, confident strides. In my previous life, when the call came, Calvin thought the same thing. But I knew it wasn't an act, and I tried my best to stop him. After an entire night of searching, his parents were finally rescued. Yet as soon as he saved them, he left again, and came back with the news: Lily Snow was dead. He blamed me for everything. As soon as Calvin left, I picked up the phone and called the police. $30,000 wasn't a small amount, and it had to be in cash. I couldn't pull that together immediately, and even if I could, there was no guarantee the kidnappers would release the hostages after getting the money. This wasn't something I could gamble on. the police had to handle it. After calling emergency services, I waited for the authorities to arrive. But before they could, I got a call from someone familiar. "Hey, Vivian, it's Eric Quinn. Did you and Calvin get into a fight or something?" I frowned. "What's the reason for your call?" "Well, just now, you called the cops, didn't you?" "Look, I know we know each other, but making a false report is serious. If you two are just arguing, keep it between yourselves. Don't stir up trouble like this. Calvin and Lily didn't do anything. Stop being bitter and making a fool out of him." It took me a moment to realize what he was implying. "You're saying Calvin told you I made a false report?" I asked, my voice low. There was silence on the other end. I gave a cold laugh. "Listen to me, Eric Quinn. I suggest you send real officers over immediately. Otherwise, I'll report you directly to your superiors." His tone turned sharp. "Don't think I'm like Calvin, ready to bend over for you. I don't work for the Turner family. Women like you are poison. One strand of Lily Snow's hair is worth more than your whole life." I hung up. Immediately, I called 911 again and reported Eric Quinn. Within 15 minutes, another team of officers arrived. They asked me some questions and listened to the recording of the kidnapper's first call. Their expressions grew serious. They began tracing the number, but it was an unregistered burner phone, already switched off. We'd have to wait for their next call. While the police continued their investigation, I contacted my personal financial manager. "How much liquid cash do I have available right now?" $17,000, they answered. "Prepare all of it," I said. "Immediately." After hanging up, I immediately called Uncle Thomas, Calvin Turner's uncle. As soon as he heard that Calvin's parents had been kidnapped, he gasped, panicked. "Who the hell did this? Is Calvin there with you?" "No," I said. "He went camping with Lily Snow." "Uncle, the kidnappers are demanding $30,000 in cash. I can't raise the full amount on my own. Could you help me? I promise I'll pay you back within a week." "Vivian, what are you saying? You're talking about Calvin's parents here. You don't need to mention paying me back. How much are you short?" $13,000. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll start gathering the money right away." Half an hour flew by. The phone rang again. I picked up instantly. The police technicians beside me immediately began attempting to trace the call, but they just shook their heads. No location. My heart sank. A cold voice echoed from the other end. "Time's up. Do you have the money or not?" "Not yet," I said quickly. "Please, just give me a bit more time. My husband's not home, I'm doing my best to gather it all alone. I already told you, when time's up, if there's no money, we kill the hostages. Please," I begged. "Don't hurt them. You want money, right? If you kill them, you'll get nothing. You'll lose more than you gain. Just 30 more minutes. I swear, I'll have it all by then." Before I could say more, I heard heartbreaking screams, Calvin's parents crying in agony, followed by the cruel voice of the kidnapper. 30 more minutes? Fine. But for every half hour, we take 5 fingers from each of them. If you want to stall, go ahead. Then the line went dead. Suddenly, Eric Quinn appeared at the door. He'd heard the whole call. His face had turned pale. He stammered, "See, Calvin called me earlier. He said your in-laws were just pretending, to keep him from going camping. That this was all an act." I couldn't even be bothered to argue. One of the detectives turned to him and said firmly, "Then call Calvin. Tell him what's really going on." Eric nodded quickly and stepped aside to make the call. The line connected, but Calvin's phone was busy. I thought of my mother-in-law, how delicate she was, how she needed someone to blow on her burn even if she spilled hot water. And now, what kind of pain was she enduring? I took a deep breath to stay composed, then tried calling Uncle Thomas again. This time, he answered. Before I could even ask if he'd gathered the money, he let out a heavy sigh. Vivian. I'm not trying to blame you, but how could you pull something like this on your elders? Your in-laws love you, and you should talk some sense into them too. If I hadn't double-checked with Calvin, you might have given me a heart attack. In that moment, it felt like my heart stopped. So Calvin had told him we were staging all of this? I swallowed hard. Uncle. It's okay if you don't believe me. But can you reach Calvin's parents right now? The police are right here beside me. On the other end of the line, Uncle Thomas just kept sighing, then gently advised me. Vivian, if Calvin's heart is with someone else, maybe it's better to divorce. That way, both of you can be free. I hung up the phone. Across the room, Eric Quinn finally managed to get through to Calvin Turner. Calvin, you need to come home now. Seriously, I think your parents really have been kidnapped. But the person who answered wasn't Calvin. It was Lily Snow. Eric, she said with a laugh, are you playing along with Miss Vivian Turner's drama too? Calvin's grilling meat right now. I'll go tell him you called. I heard her turn and relay Eric's words. Calvin didn't even bother to pick up the phone. I could clearly hear him in the background. Get lost. Vivian is insane, won't let anyone live in peace. Click. The call ended. Eric slowly lowered his phone, his face tense and confused. I lowered my eyes and let out a bitter smile. I didn't have any leads. But the kidnappers had asked me to bring the money to Liberty Square. Even though I hadn't gathered the full amount, I still had to go. If I go as bait, I asked, would it improve your chances of catching them? The female officer beside me spoke up, Miss Turner, let me go instead. I gave a faint smile. What if the kidnappers recognize me? If you go, won't that blow our cover? Just stay hidden and cover the perimeter. I'll go alone. Since there were no better options, they agreed to my proposal. When the kidnappers called again, I lied and told them the money was ready. I asked for the exact location for the exchange. There was a cold laugh on the other end. Fine, the voice said with a sneer. Something felt wrong. I quickly spoke up before the call ended. Let me hear my in-laws' voices. What's the rush, Miss Turner? You'll be seeing them very soon. Click. The call ended. I asked the financial director to load the money into a suitcase and bring it to the location the kidnappers had designated. Not long after, I got another call. Go to the underground parking lot. Your in-laws are waiting there. I didn't bring the money, since officers were already stationed above. I rushed down to the parking garage. There, I found Mrs. Turner's car. The door was already open. Both of them were inside, throats slashed, blood pouring out uncontrollably. Tears streamed down my face. I stumbled toward them, screaming for help, someone, please. 2 people have been stabbed in the neck. Underground garage, Liberty Square, send paramedics now. I gripped their hands tightly. Please, hold on. The doctors are coming. Don't give up on me. I dialed Calvin's number again, begging him to come immediately. They could barely breathe, but looked at me with sorrowful eyes and shook their heads weakly. Vivian, Mr. Turner whispered, after this, divorce Calvin. All of our shares, property, trust funds, and cash, we're leaving everything to you. We're sorry. Tears blurred my vision as I shook my head frantically. No. This isn't your fault. I didn't raise the money in time. I was too late. Don't blame yourself, Mr. Turner whispered faintly. It's not your fault. The kidnappers, they never intended to let us live. I kept calling Calvin Turner. The line kept ringing, no one answered. I sent a message through WeChat. Calvin, your parents are critically injured. Come home. Now. The message fell into a void, no reply. I kept calling, kept messaging. And then, I watched my in-laws slowly close their eyes. Still, Calvin never responded. Not a single word. The ambulance finally arrived. But it was too late. I stood up. My vision went black for a moment, the ground seemed to tilt beneath me. I instinctively reached out and grabbed the door for support. A hand caught me. It was the officer who had come with me. "Miss Turner," she said gently, "the money wasn't taken. The man who came for it fell from above during the pursuit. He's currently unconscious. I'm sorry for your loss." We spent the entire night at the station. After giving my full statement, the forensics team began collecting evidence from the bodies of Calvin's parents. Turns out, the kidnappers weren't acting alone. But so far, only one of them had been apprehended. The case was now classified as a major crime. Tension filled every corner of the station. The pressure to catch the others was immense. After the police finished collecting evidence, I contacted the funeral home. Calvin Turner still hadn't called or replied to any messages. So I sent word to the rest of the Turner family and their close friends. Except Uncle Thomas. I didn't inform him. He heard about it from someone else. Enraged, he called me directly. "Vivian, how could you be so heartless? Even if you and Calvin had issues, his parents always treated you well. You call this respect? How dare you make a joke out of two elders' lives?" I listened to his accusations in silence, then responded calmly. "I'm at the Riverton Police Department. I just finished giving my statement and have already contacted the funeral home. If you don't believe me, you don't have to come to the funeral. I never intended to inform you." There was silence on the other end. Then his voice softened. "You said you're at the police station? Let me speak to the officer." I was just about to hand my phone to the female officer next to me, when a firm voice came through the line. "This is Officer Daniels from the Riverton PD. Are you Mr. Thomas Caldwell? We have an ongoing investigation and need your cooperation." When Thomas Caldwell was brought into the station, I still hadn't left. The moment he saw me, he charged forward, shouting, "Vivian Turner! Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell us this wasn't some act? You killed my brother and sister-in-law. You're a murderer." I stared at Thomas Caldwell coldly and replied flatly, "I already told you, I even came to you asking for help. It was Calvin Turner who told you not to trust me. It was Calvin who got his own parents killed. And you were his accomplice." His face turned pale. His lips trembled. He walked past me without saying a word or daring to look back. I turned and called out after his retreating figure. "Uncle Thomas, when I called you, the police were already at the scene. They heard everything." He didn't turn around, but I could see the regret in his steps. The female officer handling the case was still beside me. I turned to her. "You can go ahead with your duties. I'll wait here for the funeral home." She shook her head gently, a bit of guilt in her eyes. "I'll stay with you." While we waited for the funeral team to arrive, I called my lawyer. "Mr. Shields, I need you to draft me a divorce agreement. I'm filing for divorce from Calvin Turner." "That's sudden. Is it urgent?" His voice carried some surprise. I nodded slightly. "Very urgent." After hanging up, the officer beside me gave me a stunned look. I lowered my eyes and let out a bitter laugh. Everyone knew how deeply I loved Calvin Turner. But he had never loved me, not once. We waited until the funeral staff arrived and carried away the bodies. I accompanied them to handle the paperwork. The mortuary attendants cleaned and dressed Mr. and Mrs. Turner with care. Only once everything was done did I finally return home. On the way back, I picked up the divorce papers. When I arrived, Calvin Turner and Lily Snow were already home. To my surprise, Lily was sitting on my bed, and Calvin was kneeling beside her, carefully cleaning a scrape on her leg with antiseptic. They froze for just a moment when they saw me, but quickly returned to acting as if nothing was wrong. Lily, sitting there casually, smiled at me. Back already, Miss Turner? Dressed like that? You expected me to sleep outside alone all night? She glanced at Calvin, who was gently dabbing at her wound. He lifted her leg like it was something precious. It was just a superficial scrape. My mind flashed back to when I had a miscarriage shortly after we got married. Calvin had been completely indifferent. During my postpartum recovery, it was his mother who took care of me. Calvin was always at work or on a business trip. I tried to be understanding then, thinking he was just busy with his career. But now I realized I was just making excuses for him. If it had been Lily, he probably would have stayed by her side day and night, heart-aching with worry. If I hadn't died once, I never would have seen the truth. Lily noticed the distant look in my eyes and took the opportunity to gloat. Sorry, Miss Turner. I borrowed your bedroom for a bit. I tripped earlier, wasn't careful. Just a little fall. I'm fine, I said. No need to fuss. But Calvin Turner insisted, refusing to let anyone else do it. He had to dress the wound himself to feel at ease. We'll be done soon, he added casually. As Lily Snow started to stand, she deliberately brushed her leg against the scrape and let out a soft gasp of pain. Calvin immediately turned and glared at me. What, are you scared she's faking it? He snapped. Sit down. Be careful, it might start bleeding again. Lily sat obediently, her eyes meeting mine with a look that said, Vivian, I didn't steal anything. Calvin's the one who cares about me. I stared back at her, expression calm, lips curling into a faint, cold smile. What a joke. Just days ago, Calvin's parents had their throats slit. I could only imagine the pain they endured. They never got to see their son one last time. Now, they were lying cold at the funeral home. And here he was, treating a tiny surface scrape like it was made of gold. Absolutely absurd. I turned to Calvin, not a shred of emotion left in my heart. I pulled the divorce papers from my leather bag and handed them to him. He glanced up, eyebrows tightening in irritation. What's this? Divorce papers? Calvin Turner, I said firmly. Let's get divorced. He froze, cotton swab in hand, then looked up at me with that familiar cold stare, full of disdain. After a long breath, he finished wrapping Lily's leg, then stood up and looked down at me. Vivian, you really want a divorce? I nodded. He let out a cold, mocking laugh. If that's what you want, fine by me. But don't come crying to the elders again and dragging them into this. I won't, I said flatly, pulling a pen from my bag and handing it to him. Without hesitation, Calvin signed the paper and tossed both the pen and the divorce agreement back at me. Now no one could ever force him to stay bound to me again. I calmly gathered the papers and looked up at him. Calvin, will you be attending your parents' funeral? At that question, his face turned pale. Before he could respond, Lily butted in. Vivian, enough is enough. What's your problem? Are you trying to curse him now? How could you be so cruel? After everything they did for you, you're just going to turn your back on them because of a divorce? I looked at her. Then I looked back at Calvin. His face was full of anger. Vivian, he growled. You've been putting on this act all night. Haven't you had enough? I met his eyes calmly and asked again. Are you going or not? Furious, he shoved me hard and shouted. If you've gone crazy, go be crazy somewhere else. Don't start acting insane here. I didn't react. He'd laid hands on me, but after all, I wasn't the one who'd just lost their parents. His parents were gone, what was the point of arguing with Calvin Turner anymore? I simply repeated what I had already said. I've sent out the notices. I'll divide the assets as stated in the divorce agreement. 1 week from now, we'll go to the civil office and make it official. With that, I turned and began to walk away. Lily Snow hurried to pick up the divorce papers that had fallen by the side of the bed. You're taking all of Mr. and Mrs. Turner's shares, trust funds, cash, real estate? have you lost your mind?" Her expression was filled with shock, as though I'd just stolen something from her personally. And really, wasn't that how she saw it? If she married Calvin Turner, she'd inherit everything that came from his parents eventually, wouldn't she? Calvin took the agreement from Lily's hands and flipped through it, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Vivian, what the hell is this supposed to mean?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "It's what your parents wanted." "No way." Calvin and Lily both shouted at once, then glanced awkwardly at each other. "If you don't believe me," I said coolly, "call them yourself." Calvin immediately pulled out his phone. He called his mother, her phone was off. Then he called his father, also off. Only then did something seem to click in his head. He rushed to the door and yelled for the housekeeper. "Ms. Chu. Where are my parents?" Ms. Chu already knew everything. She looked at me slowly before answering. Calvin snapped, "What are you looking at her for? Where are my parents?" She lowered her head, voice trembling. "Sir, something terrible happened." Calvin's face twisted in denial. "You're fired," he barked. "As of today." Ms. Chu looked shocked. "But sir, I didn't do anything wrong." Lily cut in, laughing coldly. "Nothing wrong? You clearly work for the Turner family, not the Harrisons. Yet here you are, colluding with Vivian to curse Calvin's parents. And you think that's fine?" Ms. Chu looked like she wanted to speak up, but I stepped in, gently pulling her behind me. "You can stay. When I move out of this house, you're coming with me." Her eyes welled up with gratitude. Calvin, fuming, picked up the phone again and tried calling the company attorney, but the line went unanswered. He then called Thomas Caldwell. I was going to mention that he was currently speaking with the police, but thought better of it and held my tongue. Sure enough, it sounded like Mr. Caldwell had just finished giving his statement. He answered the call with audible sobs. "Where are you?" he cried. "You need to come home. Right now." Calvin frowned. "I'm at home." "What are you talking about? You haven't seen them yet?" Caldwell's voice cracked. "They had their throats slit, one strike, that's all it took. What could they have done to deserve such hatred? Calvin, I failed them. I'm dying inside." Every word from Mr. Caldwell was soaked in tears. Calvin's face began to harden, the color draining from it. He clenched his jaw. "Are you drunk again?" he asked sharply. On the other end, Thomas Caldwell broke down completely. Thomas Caldwell sobbed through the phone. "I'd rather be drunk. I wish this were just a nightmare. Calvin, your brother's gone. I don't have a brother anymore." His crying grew louder, more uncontrollable. Calvin Turner ended the call abruptly. Lily Snow quickly clung to his arm, coaxing gently. "Calvin, they're lying to you, it's Vivian and Uncle Thomas. They must have conspired to trick you. Call the police and ask again." But Calvin was no longer certain. He recalled Eric Quinn's call from the night before. A deep, gut-wrenching unease was building inside him. He unlocked his phone and saw dozens of missed calls, all from me. Then he opened WeChat, and one by one, he played the voice messages I had sent. "Calvin Turner, your parents are in critical condition. Please come home. Even if you don't reply, please, just come back. Calvin, have you come back yet? Calvin, your parents are gone." My voice echoed through the room, trembling with grief. Calvin's eyes turned red. He immediately called Eric Quinn. "Calvin," Eric answered, finally. "Are you home yet? Your sister-in-law already handled everything, the bodies have been transferred." I'm so sorry." At that moment, Calvin completely lost control. He shouted into the phone. "When did this happen? Why didn't you tell me?" Eric sighed. "Last night. Vivian went out alone, trying to raise the ransom. The plan was to exchange money for their release, but it went wrong. We only managed to capture one of the kidnappers. He's still unconscious. Calvin threw the divorce papers to the floor and stormed out of the house. Lily Snow whined behind him, limping after him. Calvin, where are you going? My leg still hurts, wait for me. He stopped, turned around, and said coldly, Stay here. Don't go anywhere. Lily clearly wasn't happy with that response. But Calvin didn't take her along, he walked out alone. The moment he was gone, Lily angrily pulled out her phone to call someone for a ride. But before she could dial, I snatched the phone from her hand. Sorry, Miss Snow. You're not allowed to leave. Lily's face turned livid, eyes filled with rage. Vivian Turner, what do you think you're doing? I looked at her calmly. Until Calvin Turner returns, you're staying here. I didn't have to wait for Calvin. The police arrived first. They held out their badges. Miss Lily Snow, the lead officer said, you're required to come with us for further questioning. I turned to look at the woman in front of me, her expression pale with panic. The officer looked at me and explained. Miss Turner, the kidnapper who fell during the escape has regained consciousness. During interrogation, he revealed the kidnapping was carried out under Miss Lily Snow's instruction. Lily went ghost white, shaking her head furiously. No, no. I didn't tell anyone to kidnap them. The officer's tone grew firm. Miss Snow, you'll need to explain everything down at the station. Lily Snow was taken away by the police. I began arranging the funeral for Calvin Turner's parents myself. I personally went to purchase cemetery plots. Since both had passed at the same time, I bought a double plot so they could be buried together. I also hired a spiritual advisor to choose an appropriate burial date. Once everything was properly arranged, I sent out funeral announcements to their relatives and friends, informing them of the service details. 2 days before the funeral, I received a call from the funeral home. Miss Turner, the staff said, your husband has been staying here overnight for several days. We kindly ask you to come get him, he's starting to disrupt our operations. I drove over. Calvin was curled up on the floor, looking utterly broken. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair had turned completely white. He stared at me silently. Vivian, do you hate me? He asked hoarsely. I didn't answer his question. The funeral home staff asked me to come. You're disturbing their work, I said calmly. Go home. He slowly reached out his hand, maybe hoping I'd help him up. But I didn't move. The funeral is the day after tomorrow, I continued. I've already notified the guests, and the burial plot has been secured. Go home and rest. You'll need your strength for tomorrow's cremation. He looked at me, then spoke in a low voice. Can we not get divorced after all? I let out a soft laugh. Even though his eyes were filled with sorrow, my smile remained faint, detached. I don't love you anymore, Calvin. I still want the divorce. He said nothing more. Eventually, he stood up from the floor, returned home, showered, and went to sleep. I stayed in the living room. The next morning, I was woken by a phone call from the police. Miss Turner, we need you to come to the station immediately. Something's happened. What is it? I asked. Lily Snow is dead. She was killed by Calvin Turner. When I arrived at the station, Calvin refused to see me. The officer in charge of the case explained what had happened. All the kidnappers had been captured. They confessed, the mastermind was Lily Snow. Originally, she only wanted to have Calvin's parents kidnapped to drive a wedge between us. To force our divorce. But among the kidnappers was a man who had been secretly in love with Lily. He believed that years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Turner had looked down on Lily's background, that they had driven her away from Calvin because she came from a poor family. The original kidnapping had been a staged plan. But remembering Lily's past complaints and sob stories, the man's anger turned into a desire for vengeance. So he turned the fake plan into a real crime. They planned to take the money and flee. One of the kidnappers had been caught after falling from a building. The other two were arrested while trying to flee the country. But there was something I still couldn't understand. Why did Calvin Turner kill Lily Snow? After all, she hadn't intended to kill his parents. The officer shook his head gently. Maybe because love, when too deep, turns into hatred just as deep. Due to his detention, Calvin couldn't attend his parents' funeral. After the ceremony, I went to stay with my own parents for a few days. By the time I returned, Calvin's trial was already underway. A prosecutor came to see me. They hoped I could persuade Calvin to cooperate with the investigation. I declined. 2 months later, the same person came to see me again. She said, "The verdict is in. Death penalty. Execution will be carried out immediately." Calvin Turner had requested to see me one last time. If I had another chance at life, he had written, I'd never make the same mistake again. I am Calvin. We sat across from each other, separated by a thick pane of glass. He slowly picked up the phone receiver. I took a deep breath and lifted mine too. We stared at each other in silence for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Vivian, I'm sorry." I stayed quiet. Forgiveness was beyond me. I knew where he was headed, down into hell. I frowned, nausea rising in my chest. I didn't want to hear anything more. "You called me here, just to say that?" "I don't want to hear it." I started to hang up. But Calvin suddenly jumped up, causing the guards behind him to restrain him. He screamed into the receiver. "Vivian! I was wrong. I never wanted to divorce you. I didn't. Hate me. Hate me all you want. I was deceived by that bitch, Lily Snow. In the past, she never even died. She faked it, took the ransom, and lived in comfort. She lied to me, Vivian. It was all a lie. I'm sorry, it was my fault. Vivian, in the next life, please, let me make it up to you." I looked at him. Memories flashed before me, of him standing coldly on the hillside, watching as I was torn apart by wild beasts. I slowly closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I met his gaze. "Calvin Turner, before you die. I'll be going to the civil registry to officially annul our marriage. You are not worthy of being called my late husband." I hung up without hesitation and turned to leave. That same afternoon, I walked into the civil registry office with divorce papers in hand and filed to dissolve our marriage. 1 week later, Calvin Turner was executed. I sold every piece of real estate, emptied my investment accounts, and decided to sell my shares in Turner Group as well. Thomas Caldwell. Calvin's uncle sold his house, his car, and even took out several loans to buy back the Turner Group shares from me. With the money in hand, I left everything behind and quietly disappeared overseas. The rest of my life stretched before me. A wide, open sky of freedom.